They only suck zombie takeout, my lord.
What's up? Welcome to episode 318 of Zombie Takeout.
Zombie takeout.
The B-Movie and Cult Movie Podcast. I'm Uncle John.
And I'm Scotto.
And before we get to this week's movie, we've got quite a bit of listeners submitted. Miles Lowry sent us an email saying, I have been listening to y'all for a while now, and I can't believe that the movie Zombievers hasn't come across y'all's radar. It has come across our radar, we just keep forgetting about it. To that end, I did add it to the list. It's right after Escape from Tomorrow, so it's the last one we have in order.
I thought we had it on the list. No?
I checked, because I know we've talked about it. Other people have suggested it. But I looked, it's not on there. It's on there now. It's the last movie that we have scheduled.
Wow.
Unless we want to move it up. You know, it'll be in like August or September, unless we want to move it up. But it's there for now.
We do. We have got a lot on the schedule, and who knows how many tributes we will have to do.
That's a good point, yeah.
From now until then.
Yeah, that's why I moved Warcraft up. And John Phillips commented on our Facebook page on the post from last week's episode, our review of Kelly's Heroes, saying, John Landis avoided the disaster in 1941. Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, and Bob Gale. Yeah, you corrected yourself on that a couple minutes afterward, and you mentioned that it was Spielberg.
And I wouldn't call 1941 a disaster. I mean,
I don't know that I've ever seen it, actually. Or if I have, it's been ages.
I mean, I guess what he's saying in the sense is it was a monster budget that was, I mean, ridiculous and didn't make its money back. But I remember quite enjoying it as a kid. It's very politically incorrect and will not hold up.
Of course.
During these days, especially the view of Japanese people. But it was, of 1941. Not in the 70s.
And Zemeckis and Bob Gale wrote it. That's why you mentioned them.
Yeah.
And finally, we have a voicemail from Bodo. He's not too happy about our take on Kelly's Heroes.
Bodo here. Gotta call you out on Kelly's Heroes. You didn't like it? Too much fluff? Not a good war movie? It's the best war movie ever made. Well, besides Midway, and Patton, and The Longest Day, and Battle of the Bulge, and Tora, and Sergeant York. But besides that, it's still a great movie. And Carol O'Connor, what do you mean he's unnecessary? He's great in that role as the general, listening to the game, telling Booker to get him his uniform and his medals. It was a fun movie. Yeah, it was kind of slow in some areas. I understand the church bell ringing scene was kind of monotonous, and when they were going through the minefield was kind of unnecessary, but all in all, overall, you gotta recommend the movie, guys. Anyway, still love the show. Keep up the great work. Bye.
Well, I think my review is pretty good.
You were pretty positive. Yeah, you actually did recommend it.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I was the one who was off the mark.
Well, I mean, one thing though, he did list a lot of other war movies
that were better. Yeah.
I mean, I would throw in Apocalypse Now,
of course,
Deer Hunter, maybe the first half of Full Metal Jacket and Saving Private Ryan.
And okay, didn't like it. Obviously, completely subjective. Too much fluff, also subjective. Not a good war movie. I don't know if I mentioned this last week. I really don't see it as a war movie. It's a heist movie set during a war.
Yeah, I think you got a point there. But it is a war movie because they did have, combat scenes in it.
Well, fair point. Yeah.
So yeah, you could say it's a war movie with a heist in it, or a heist with a war movie in it. They were going for a split there, which wasn't very common back in those days. Yeah. Definitely,
it was ambitious. I'll give it that.
You could almost say, I think it was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was practically in the Civil War, but just out west, where away from the battlefront. or at least I remember there was something with it may have been post-war, but there was definitely a Confederate element to it.
Yeah.
And of course, The Longest Day is a very good choice for a fantastic war movie too.
I've heard of most of them. Honestly, I think Patton's the only one I've seen of the ones Bodo mentioned.
Oh yeah, I hadn't even thought of the Patton and Bridge on the River Kwai too. And as far as great performances in a war movie, you go Patton and Bridge on the River Kwai with Mr. of course Obi-Wan Kenobi.
You mentioned Star Wars. I think that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge of war movies, honestly.
Well, after seeing Alec Guinness in other movies, I totally recommend you see Bridge on the River Kwai, yeah. And where the scene where he's being interrogated.
I'll watch anything with Guinness. All right, so on to some news. Well, again, kind of more of an announcement. I found out last night on Twitter that there is a Kickstarter campaign for Wet Hot American Summer Fantasy Camp role-playing game. A tabletop RPG based on Wet Hot American Summer.
So can someone be the soup can?
You can play as a number of characters in the movie or roll your own character. I don't know exactly what the campaign is going to be. Probably something along the lines of summer camp, obviously.
Why does anybody need to buy something like that when you can pretty much just make up?
You could create your own, yeah. If you know how to create an RPG, yeah.
The rules of Dungeons and Dragons, right. Or whatever RPG you like.
I kicked in $10 just to get the PDF of the rules, just to see what it was. And I also want to give a shout out to Lucia Fasano, who tweeted about it. That's how I found out about it. And also recommend her. She's a great singer-songwriter and comedian. LuciaFasano on Twitter, and pretty much all social networks and Bandcamp. All right, so on to this week's movie, which is from 1986, Gothic, and this was recommended by Lush Bunny. Of course, that brings us to the impromptu plot summary, sponsored by Romanticism. And you thought people were freaks nowadays.
And also brought to you by a Thomas Dolby score. When you want a total distraction to your film, use a Thomas Dolby score.
I think it added to it personally, but
I mean, come on. Nothing says 1980s more than a Thomas Dolby music. And if you're trying to do a period piece, you are completely taken out of it.
I have in my notes, it didn't fit the setting, but it fit the tone.
And of course, the Bonnie Tyler Meatloaf video feel to the whole movie with that just completely took anything out of it.
It's going to get interesting this week.
Let's do this plot summary. Well, let's see. Byron had some friends over that happened, of course, be some of the greatest writers in the English language.
Well, at the time, only one of them was.
Well, they go on to be it.
Yeah.
The original story, of course, goes they sit around a fire and tell ghost stories. And, of course, it leads to Mary Shelley, or Mary Godwin, I believe at the time is her name.
They weren't married yet.
Yeah. She's also supposed to be 19 at this point.
Right. Wow. I'd rather they cast Natasha Richardson than a 19-year-old.
So it leads to, of course, Frankenstein, which, of course, this movie... spoiler alert, by the way, because you don't mention it to the very end of the movie, like, she writes Frankenstein.
Well, yeah. You go in knowing that. That's why you watch the movie. This is the birth of Frankenstein. Or the conception.
Right. But they don't treat it that way. They treat it like it was the big thing at the end, and she writes Frankenstein. The close of it, and you're supposed to be like, oh my god, that's right, she does.
See, yeah, to me it was just an epilogue to say, because they didn't mention Frankenstein at all, or the vampire, which John Polidori wrote, who was also one of them. They don't mention them at all during the story. So I myself was thinking, with all this going on, when are they going to have time to write? So they throw in this little epilogue and say, afterwards they wrote these two, groundbreaking works of genre fiction.
When they were through tripping balls, because pretty much that's what
that's the movie.
Most of the movie is them tripping balls and just going out on... They don't actually say what they took, really.
Laudanum.
But, okay, they did?
They did say it.
All right, so that's what they took, and they...
Which is a tincture of opium.
I was gonna say, was it in the vinegar? Was that what the deal was?
No, it was when they were all gathered around. I guess it was that little fountain. That shot pointing up of the five of them all kind of gathered around, and that's when Clara collapses.
Oh, when they did the seance.
Yeah, because she took too much.
She took too much and yeah, had to crash. All right.
Anyway.
So yes, when they finally come down, they get a chance to write. But yeah, pretty much it is just...
Yeah, everybody gets together at Byron's. They trip and stuff happens.
Hilarity ensues.
It gets real horror show, to quote.
A group of tourists come in.
Clockwork.
And,
yeah,
horror show.
And the hilarity ensues?
Yes, hilarity ensues.
And the version on snagfilms.com, which is the link I sent you, starts a little differently than the version on YouTube that I rented. On the Snagfilm version, there's a quote from Mary Shelley telling the story of the was it a weekend or just a night at Byron's? Actually, I think she said it was like multiple trips to Byron's.
Well, they spent a lot of time together.
Yeah.
Both in Europe and a little in England too.
Well, they spent a lot of time at Byron's place that summer. And I think it was one of those times where the events happened, and they had just had a basically a ghost story contest.
Yeah.
And then that led to Frankenstein, which I've gone on at length about when we reviewed I, Frankenstein. I adore the book. And also The Vampire by John Polidori, which was the first romantic vampire story. Romantic with a capital R. And that set the tone for every vampire story to come after it. They've all been romantic after that. Before that, the vampire was an Eastern European folklore monster.
Yeah. And I mean, there really isn't much of the ghost storytelling in the movie. It's very, very brief.
Well, that's the thing that I wasn't sure about at first, because I read the plot summary, as I always do. And we talk about, I like to go in knowing as much as possible. You like to go in as blind as possible.
Yeah.
I've read the Wikipedia plot summary, and I still was not prepared for this movie. Because it gets real weird.
Well, yeah, but that's pretty much all it is. It's just them getting weird.
And it perfectly illustrates the ideals of Romanticism. Romanticism was all about throwing out the rules and propriety of the classical era and living in your emotions and being primal and just doing whatever the fuck you want.
Well, I mean, that's at least Byron's take on it.
Well, those were the ideals. Who knows how many people actually lived like that. Given Byron's reputation, I suspect he may have.
Coleridge and Wadsworth, they were more about trying to find that sweet spot, Yeah. They trying to pretty much leave the planet for just a bit, or leave your senses and just kind of, hitting the apex of the pyramid, if you will.
Mm.
And Byron was all, of course, about just going into one direction and finding it that way.
So the movie was far more chaotic than I was expecting, because I went in expecting just a period drama with a bit of horror.
Well, yeah, I was expecting more of that too.
Yeah, and then you get Dolby's score, which is all synthesizers and very 80s and very chaotic.
Oh, yeah. It's so 1980s.
And Claire was just unbelievably weird. And I don't mean I couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't believe the character. And Polidori is just this cartoonish fop. And I just didn't quite get it until maybe a half hour in. And I realized it's Romanticism, the movie.
Yeah, the thing is, though, there isn't actually... I guess you could say, they're throwing out the plot.
He deliberately threw out the plot midway through the movie.
Oh, I don't think there was ever one to begin with.
Well, they get together, they take the drug.
They get together, they hallucinate.
And she overdoes it. She's recovering for the rest of the movie, pretty much. And that's the plot.
Blowing in the wind, yeah. And that's it.
That's the plot. And then it's just a collection of horror set pieces, which I loved. Particularly the juxtaposition of the leeches under the helmet of the suit of armor, and then the leeches on the food.
Well, I mean, that was at least explainable, and
Polidori put the leeches on the food as a prank on Byron. Polidori was gay and apparently had a thing for Byron.
Yeah. But the things that were just irksome were the black room with the doors and just the constant I guess, what was it, shrieking or whatever kind of that they would put in this. I think that they worked in the score too, or was something that the director put in. It was just all obnoxious as hell.
It was chaotic, which once I got a feel for it, I loved. Although, with regard to Byron, or actually with regard to Gabriel Byrne, was he ever young?
I thought he looked young here, and
he was in his mid-30s.
He looks very weird young. He's a dude who aged into his looks.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Definitely. He was in his mid-30s. He looks like he's 50. I just can't imagine him young.
This actually reminded me of the show that I've only seen a few episodes of, but it reminded me of it, Vinyl, on HBO.
Okay. Yeah, one of your titles referenced it.
Gabriel Byrne here reminded me a lot of Bobby Cannavale's character.
Okay.
And a lot of it was just ham-fisted references shoved in, and a soundtrack that just kind of got annoying after a while.
Mm.
So, I mean, but yeah, Gabriel Byrne just like this with the hair and everything too, and like the leather outfit. I was like, holy shit. That's Bobby Cannavale's character for fun. I was waiting for them to start doing lines.
Well, it was a bit before then. They had the laudanum, which I think Percy Shelley wanted to keep doing.
Yeah.
They suggested that he was an addict.
Oh yeah, totally.
He actually was?
Yeah.
He's the one of them who I don't really know about. I love Byron's work. I've talked about Frankenstein.
I've never been much of a fan of Percy.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with his work. And obviously, I'd never heard of Polidori before this. But I just bought The Vampire on Audible, so I'm looking forward to listening to that. Now, I do have one little pedantic nitpick. At times, Mary Shelley's accent sounds a bit Irish. Neither Natasha Richardson nor Mary Shelley were Irish, so I don't know where that was coming from.
It's weird that they would be British and get into generic European accent.
And the one who would have reasonably sounded Irish here and there is Byrne, and I think his English accent was pretty solid.
Yes, it was actually. Julian Sand reminded me a lot of Graham Chapman.
he looks a bit like him,
which
yeah.
also took me a lot out of the movie too.
He looks a bit like him, you're right.
Are you saying we eat my mother?
Miriam Sir was interesting. I'm guessing on her pronunciation of her last name. Claremont.
Yeah.
Because she's French-Canadian and her accent popped out here and there.
And that seems like a very Welsh name.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, like that here.
Mm-hmm. But her performance was completely over the top from go.
Oh, yeah, it was. After a while, it did get annoying as fuck too.
And again, I came from it from the opposite perspective. It annoyed me at first. I really didn't get it. I have in my notes she was, unbelievable and overacting ridiculously. Once I got the point of the movie, it worked for me.
They just watched too many Rocky Horror Picture Show screenings, it seemed like, and she was being Columbia. It was just, I mean, oh yeah, she just never, I was just kind of like, is she going to die yet? Can we get rid of her finally?
And her and Byron's relationship kind of made me think that this would have been a better choice for the BDSM trilogy than Bitter Moon. Although I wasn't sure if they were still tripping throughout the entire movie until Percy Shelley went into the shed.
Oh, yeah.
He goes to close the door on this shed that's banging because there's a storm going on. It opens again. He goes inside for some reason. And he sees a couple of monsters that you don't really get a good look at because he's tripping and they're not really there. And that's really kind of when I figured out what all the horror is. It's not actual horror. It's just a bad trip.
Well, right. That was just, and they would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those meddling kids kind of thing. It was just it wasn't really, a monster. It was man, that's really annoying stuff when a movie does that.
But you saw them tripping. It's not an unreasonable thing to realize, oh, okay, they're still tripping. I get it now.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for a payoff of the horror. Once I realized, oh, okay, they're all tripping.
And then when the payoff is a tourist group coming in.
I kind of liked that. That was a clever way to do an epilogue.
Oh, no. That was terrible.
it wasn't this voiceover,
Oh, it might as well have been, though.
it fit into the story a bit.
It was a voiceover through a megaphone.
A little bit before that, Polidori tries to kill himself a few times.
Yeah.
I kind of knew he wasn't going to succeed, because then how is he going to write the book?
Well, I mean, that was the thing. They were more of cries for attention than actual attempts at suicide. And you kind of knew he was going to die because nothing was going to happen in this.
Well, if he died, he can't write the book, and obviously he wrote the book after the events of the weekend.
I love at the very end, like this afterthought. Oh, by the way, Mary, what's your story? We never got to you. Of course not.
And the kid under the water at the end feels a bit like an I Smell sequel. Although, obviously, there's not going to be a sequel. Speaking of sequels and remakes, no sequel, obviously, because they just wrote the books and they were very successful and yada yada. And, well, I think we'll agree that we don't want to see remakes, but for different reasons.
I think this could have made an interesting stage play, maybe. I mean, especially if it was more of like an environmental kind of theater, where not just a proscenium. You're sitting in the audience. This would have made a cool, experience theater where it's going on around you, or you have to go from room to room to find out what the hell. Why'd he shoot the mirror kind of thing.
So not just like theater in the round or like everybody in one room, but like a building completely divided or devoted to it. That would be interesting.
And that theater is actually done so rarely because it's so hard to pull off. But I mean, I've seen something like that done once, and goddamn, it was awesome.
I can imagine. On to brains.
On to brains.
Well, just to be official, I don't want to see a remake because I think this is pretty much perfect, which gets me to my rating. I'm going 5. I absolutely loved it once I clicked into what the point of it.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I need a plot. I need some form of plot. I mean, just the flailing around and, oh, we're so crazy. I mean, I went through college and had plenty of nights like this, plenty of weekends, hell, plenty of weeks like this. And never once did I say, this would make an awesome movie. The thing I think, and I guess maybe it's generational or of our time, even from the 80s to now. The entertainment back then wasn't just the running around and craziness. They just talked. It's kind of like what we're doing right now. The entertainment of the whole thing was somebody had an idea and expressing it. But this took what they did and just turned it into this weird MTV thing. Oh man, it kills me to not need to do this to a Gabriel Byrne movie. But and I'll give it a brain for Gabriel Byrne at least. Okay. But I'm going 1.5.
All right. And what have we learned?
We learned that Lord Byron forgot his hat.
And now, if you see breasts with eyes in place of the nipples, and it's not like a statue or anything, you're probably tripping.
Well, they were eyes without a face, weren't they? Kind of based on a Billy Idol song.
Actually, well, I was going to say it was the inspiration for a Billy Idol song, but there's another movie that actually inspired that song.
A lot of this was very, film student, it's as it came off. And of course, the director is mostly a video director at the time more than anything else.
He's done a couple of other fairly notorious movies.
Including
Lair of the White Worm, which we should get to someday.
I kind of remember having the same feeling from that too, like wanting to watch that, and it was like it was just like images kind of strung together like this. So he's not big on plot.
All right, so until next time, we'll be reviewing Warcraft. You knew this was coming, and I can't wait. Until then, go to zombietakeout.com, check out the album art, the episode description, of course, the episode itself, which you're already listening to. Links to find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and YouTube. Links to subscribe via RSS and iTunes. Please leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you enjoyed the show, spread the word. Give us a little word of mouth. Of course, we appreciate all of the listeners we have, but more would be better. You'll also find the movie list, every movie we've reviewed so far, and every movie we're going to review in order up through, as I said earlier, Zombievers. That's going to be an interesting one.
Of course.
I had no idea what to expect.
I'm surprised we didn't have that on the list already.
Yeah, me too. And of course, the recommendations list. I had no idea what was going to happen with this one because, like I mentioned earlier, I can usually get a sense of, where you'll land in terms of your rating, but I had no clue what you were going to do this time.
Byron's work is just so awesome, and of course, Mary Shelley has her classic, but they just doesn't seem like they really lived up to their memory all that well. I don't think they got what it was about.
Well, I think the movie, like I've said, is more of a tribute to the Romantic era and Byron's reputation than Frankenstein or the vampire.
And then acting like it was a big reveal that she wrote Frankenstein.
I didn't take that as a big reveal. I took that as, we should mention this. Because it's kind of important.
I just envisioned somebody in the theater standing at the back. She did it! Yay!
Of course, you can email us zombietakeout@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 414-368-CTO1 or for the alphanumerically challenged.
They can go suck themselves.
414-368-9861. Of course, always remember that you'll always be calling from the middle of Milwaukee, and until next time, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there you are.
Oh, it had a happy ending. I hate happy endings. You should have watched it, the little brat.
It's the best war movie ever made. Well, besides Midway, Patton, The Longest Day, In Battle of the Bulge, and Tora Tora Tora, and Sergeant York. But besides that, it's still a great movie. And Carol O'Connor,